Well, I kind of think that the gospel we heard today was the Cecil B. DeMille moment in the Gospel of Matthew. And you know what I do when I'm getting ready to preach? About a week or so ahead of time, I read the gospel that I'm going to be preaching on, and I just hold it in my heart. And for a few days after that, I kind of check in. And I ask God, what would you have me say about this? What's important for this community right now to hear? What's important for me to hear? What should I preach on? And lo and behold, this Wednesday, God answered me by sending me a little article written by Steve Garras Holmes. He's a retired United Methodist pastor, a poet, a musician, a retreat leader. And he wrote this little article for people who are going to preach on this gospel. And it was so perfect, I thought, I'm going to read it to you. So here goes. Oh, please, do not explain this story. It's truly, divinely, accurately weird. Sure, there's a moral to the story, several, in fact. The theological constructs, stuff you should believe, fine. Hold those in your pocket. Meanwhile, sit there for a minute, cock your head a little, and just gawk at this story. It's weird. Jesus shining, dead people chatting, Peter talking nonsense, a cloud enters like a crab and holds him in its pinchers, a disembodied voice. Whoa. Don't start in on theology or psychology or meteorology or any other fool theology. This is not about ology. This is about wonder. Today is our trip to the Mount of Transfiguration. It's a place of wowee moments, of mountaintop experiences. Pastor Steve describes them as moments of pure awe, the willingness to be bedazzled when beauty and grace and loveliness overwhelm you, when God is more than you can grasp. Sometimes our God experiences are like that. Wowee moments. Once in a while. But most times, they're a little less dramatic. More like riding along in the car with someone you love and who loves you, and you don't need to say a thing. And you both can sense the wordless connection that you have. There are more of those kind of moments in our life with God than the other kind. The main thing is we need to be making ourselves available for both kinds. That's what the disciples did in today's gospel. They went on retreat with Jesus. They left behind everything and went up the mountain with him. We are created with a God-shaped hole in our spirit. And when it's empty, we experience spiritual hunger. This is our poverty. That's what St. Francis calls it. It's our absolute need for God and our absolute inability to live without God. We try to fill that hole up with all kinds of things. With food, and possessions, and control, and power, and shopping, and drugs, and alcohol, and sex. But only God can fill that hole. Only God can satisfy that hunger. The only way we can take care of our poverty is to spend time with God. We can go away on retreat just like the disciples did. But even if that's possible for us, It probably won't be more than once or twice a year. But what about the rest of the year? Jesus models one way for us. Gospels are peppered with stories of him getting away to pray. He modeled carving out a little time for prayer in the midst of his workday. My mentor, the man who sponsored me for the priesthood, was what we call a worker priest. He was an executive at Times Mirror Press full-time. And then he worked part-time some evenings and a weekend as our vicar. At noon every day, he had an office at Times Mirror that was glass all the way around. At noon every day, he closed the blinds on all the windows in his office, and he took 15 minutes to be with God. When I was a mother of 2 school-aged girls, I created a corner in a family room. I hung across there, got a small table for a candle, and a boombox for music, and I spent 15 minutes of the day in that corner, talking to and listening to God after I got the girls off to school and before I started my work. There are lots of ways to spend a little time with God. If we want to, we can get really creative. We need times to listen and wait. Times when we don't do anything. Times when we let go of our busyness and our need to control everything. Time to reflect and meditate. Time to wonder. Time to pay attention to God. To be alone with God. We were designed to do this, and we'll never be fully alive without those times with God, even in the midst of difficult times of our lives. I don't know if any of you know Frederick Buechner. He's a very popular, famous author. He's a Presbyterian pastor, and he has some amazing books. And in one of them, he recalls a long time in his life when he was so troubled, he pulled his car over and parked on the roadside. He says he was terribly depressed and afraid about his daughter's illness and what was going on in his family. As he was sitting there praying about it, he noticed a car that seemed to come out of nowhere heading towards him, slowly drove by him on the road. And he says that his message from God, the word he most needed to see at that moment, was found on that car's personalized license plate. It was the one word, he said, out of all the words in the dictionary that I needed most to see exactly then. It read, trust. Trust. The owner of that car turned out to be a trust officer at a local bank. And lo and behold, he came across this story in Buechner's book. And after reading about the incident, the trust officer paid a personal visit to Buechner one afternoon, and he presented him with the license plate. Buechner placed it on a bookshelf in his office as a reminder, always to trust. He said, it's rusty around the edges and a little battered, and it's also as holy a relic as I have ever seen. The fact that Buechner, at his lowest of times, pulled his car off the road instead of soldiering on, gave God the chance to speak to him. Today is a bridge day of sorts, a bridge between Epiphany and Lent. We go from focusing on the light of the world to the dry and arid wilderness of Lent. In a way, it's just what we all need. Because of Lent, we may choose to give up something that keeps us from being alone with God. We may give up TV, as we did in my family one year. Or we may give up computer games, or Facebook, or watching the news, whatever it is that captures so much of our attention. we may take something on. We may add something to our lives that will give us more time alone with God. A daily quiet walk, a book of devotions, 10 minutes of prayer today, just 10 minutes. No one can make us take this wilderness journey. No one can make us be alone with God. But if we are looking for a reason to be alone with God, if we are longing for a chance to listen to what God has to say to us, if we are longing to discover more fully who we are, then we can look forward to Lent with anticipation. May we take time this Lent to find food for our spiritual hunger, to withdraw from the busyness of life long enough to listen and to be alone with God. Amen.